Good evening, good evening, all you beautiful freaks out there in the internets. I am the frantic freak Talister Shane, here to bring you some stories from Reddit, specifically from the no sleep category. Now, let us see what glories await us. We shall be reading a story called "We Should Never Have Gone to Mars." Yes, I look forward to sharing with you, my friends. Let us begin, shall we? 7th of March 2019 marked one of the greatest leaps of mankind as the first settlement of human beings set foot on Mars, a project about 20 years in the making finally coming to fruition. And yet, to this day, no one seems to remember it ever happening. 7 people gave their lives to set down on Mars. The first step in colonizing another planet, and as such events usually are, it was broadcasted worldwide. Millions of people had their eyes upon Bright Horizon 9 as it landed on the Red Planet. My family was no exception, and we excitedly gathered together to watch a part of history in the making. "Wow, this looks just like Arizona," Jackson said as he took his first step on the Mars surface. "Great. Who the hell let Jackson be the one to speak? First words on Mars. Real inspirational," Cameron said sarcastically. The footage was mind-blowing. The fact that we could watch people walk on Mars, live, 30 million miles away, was just another testament to ourselves. The fact that we could do anything. Of course, there's a delay when broadcasting from another planet. It takes approximately 10 minutes for a signal to arrive from Mars, depending on what time of year it is. So live might be an overstatement, but it felt truly magnificent nonetheless. The crew joked around as they took their first walk on the surface, trying to downplay the mixture of nervousness and amazement at the sights. We'd all seen pictures from Mars before, but witnessing someone walk around, showing us the environment from their point of view, was something entirely different. "Alright, remember, we're not tourists, so let's try to seem professional. At least as long as we're on television," Gordon said, the assigned leader. Each of them had a camera mounted onto their helmet, and since us viewers received all the different feeds, we could freely switch the view on command. I've never seen my dad so excited about anything. He had just rounded 60 years of age, and even he acted as if a kid again, just watching the moon landing for the first time as he did so many years ago. A couple of weeks passed, and each moment of the astronaut's day was streamed and easily accessible online. According to the view count, at least 1 million people watched them each day. That seems conservative. Anyway, there were cuts in the signal every now and then, a few hours of dead air, and of course, they also slept at the end of each Martian day, also referred to as a soul. I kept watching them for an hour or so after coming home in the evening. It felt good to live in a time of such scientific advancements, and a part of me dreamed that I might set foot on Mars myself one day. Time flew by, and on April 9th, after about a month on Mars, I sat with my dad and watched the stream of another spacewalk. They were collecting samples and checking the foundation for future settlements. Nothing too exciting, but absolutely worth our time. Gordon was usually the one to lead the team, and though he tended to pick Cameron and Jackson, this time he included Anderson as well, a more quiet guy I'd hardly even noticed before. The crew had set down at the edge of Valles Marineris, a valley roughly 3 times the size of the Grand Canyon and far deeper. In a way, I had become attached to the crew, watching them almost every day for a month. Jackson was by far my favorite, and judged by his attitude, it was hard to think of him as a professional astronaut, always messing around, joking about the dumbest things. Gordon, on the other hand, fit the leadership role perfectly. Strictly mature, but most of all, caring. The rest of the 7 members of the crew were your run-of-the-mill geeks, apart from Anderson, who was more of a giant, each perfectly chosen for their part of the mission, but somehow not too interesting to watch. Cameron, the crew's only woman, was the smartest of the bunch, and was responsible for most of the station's maintenance. During their expedition, we mostly followed Jackson's feed, only changing over to the other channels while he was busy picking rocks. "Well, this sure is something else," Jackson said as they looked over the valley. "Yeah? You still think it looks like Arizona, jackass?" Cameron asked playfully. She tended to pick on Jackson, and he often responded with his own snide remarks. As different as they were, they made a great duo. To me, it seemed like a couple of high school kids flirting, but it was oddly endearing to see how normal life could be on a different planet. It was a particularly dark soul on Mars, and the sun was just about to descend beneath the horizon, meaning the crew had to return to the station. The sunset on Mars differed greatly from the romantic scene we see on Earth, blue and cold. It was more eerie than beautiful, raising a sense of dread in my body. "I think I prefer Earth sunsets," Jackson said. "Yeah, gonna be a while to see one of those again." "If they ever come to pick us up, that is," Jackson added. Once the sun had set sufficiently low, Gordon ordered everyone to pack up. The crew abided, but seemed upset that their work had been cut short. Before the crew could even begin to collect their things, the audio glitched out completely and the entire feed was cut from any camera available. Not a big deal, it happened often enough to seem trivial. The feed returned after a couple of minutes as I came back from the kitchen with a cup of tea. My dad had engulfed himself in the footage, which finally returned. This time we were following Gordon's point of view. We were met with the sound of panting. That is my bad, I apologize. Did anyone see that? Anderson said. Just the fact that Anderson, mountain of a man, barely ever opening his mouth to speak, uttered anything with fear in his voice felt terrifying enough. See what? Gordon asked. There was something moving from down in the chasm, Anderson clarified. Before anyone got a chance to investigate, they were interrupted by panicked Jackson. Can any of you hear me? Jackson yelled. We swapped the feed to Jackson. The camera panned frantically around as he searched for his crew. Calm down, Jackson. We're still here. The comms just shut down for a minute. Just a glitch, Gordon responded. Then why can't I see you? He asked. At that point, the camera changed to Gordon's point of view, and despite showing exactly the same environment, Jackson was nowhere in sight. Did you walk off somewhere, Jackson? What are your coordinates? No, I didn't fucking move, he shouted back. Get a hold of yourself, we'll find you. The view switched back to Jackson for a moment, just in time to see a blurry shape fly by him at an incredible speed. He let out a short scream before his feed was cut off, leaving us with nothing but a pitch-black screen. Jackson! Can you hear me? Gordon asked. Jackson! The crew looked around at each other in shock, the view once again being redirected to Gordon's feed. Where is he? Cameron asked. I don't know. Gordon was GPS, he's just gone. Call back to base. Tell them to search the grid. I'll check if he somehow fell off the cliff, Gordon said as he gestured towards Cameron. Control, do you read me? Cameron asked. No response. Control! Daniel! She repeated. Gordon, they're not responding. None of the astronauts dared come up with a suggestion, seemingly torn between going back to check on the crew at the station or to stay and search for Jackson. Now we've got to get back to the station, Anderson finally said. What about Jackson? Cameron asked. If something happens to the station, we're all dead anyway. The crew rushed back towards the Bright Horizon 9, none of them saying a word in the process. Gordon led the chase, turning around every so often to check the whole crew was following. Upon checking, Anderson had simply vanished behind them as they had run for the station. Where'd he go? Gordon asked. I don't know. He was behind me just 1 second ago, Cameron stuttered back. All the other feeds had long since gone black, including the cameras back at the station. It didn't take them long to run back to Bright Horizon 9, the doors were left open, but none of the remaining crew were anywhere to be found. Gordon was becoming more frantic by the minute, losing the clear composure he had kept up that far in the mission. Shit, what happened to them? He said. I don't know. I'll see you at the door. I'll look for any heat signatures in the vicinity, Cameron said. Wait, Cameron's the girl. Ignore that and pretend I used the right voice. She desperately typed away at the console, scanning over and over. There's no one. Wait! Whatever the console read was beyond my understanding of computers and gadgets. I was simply glued to the screen. Not me, nor my father uttered a word. A minuscule amount of hope returned to Cameron's voice. Jackson's tracker just came back on, she yelled joyfully. Gordon was heading for the door again. I'm going back out to find him. You stay here. Don't open the door until I come back, he said. The words were brave, but he couldn't hide this trembling voice. Cameron tried to refuse his orders. Promise me, he said. I promise, she reluctantly responded. I clicked back to Gordon's view. The sun had already set on Mars, and nighttime was dark as anything I'd seen on Earth, even with its 2 moons. The camera mounted on Gordon's helmet hardly captured any light, even with the flashlight he carried. Keep talking to me, Cameron, Gordon asked nervously. It shouldn't take long before I reach Jackson. Do you see any movement around you? Nothing. It's too dark, Gordon said. Wait. Jackson's GPS tracker's moving towards me. He paused, checking the location. Wait a minute. He's moving at more than 50 miles per hour. That's not... He fell silent, and his feed cut off. Cameron sat back in shocked defeat. She didn't even attempt to call out for her friends. She knew they were long gone. She simply stood up and walked towards the kitchen. Without saying a word, she picked up one of the knives and slit her own throat. The decision taking less than a split second. Since we saw it from her point of view, it was hard to tell exactly what happened, but the following stream of blood and subsequent gurgles hinted towards what she did. It felt like ages before the gurgling stopped, but no sooner had she gasped the last breath of air before a creature stood in the periphery. We couldn't see anything more than a blurry outline, far too tall and skinny to be human. Even though everything around it seemed sharp, the camera refused to focus on it, even as it moved closer. I bent down to inspect Cameron's lifeless body, still blurry, and for a moment it seemed not to understand a demise, like it couldn't grasp the concept of suicide. It quickly realized that something was watching, as it placed its own face directly before the camera. Only a second passed before the feed cut once more, but this time, rather than staying black, it was replaced with a frozen image of whatever the creature was, and the audio turned into a glass-shattering screech. The sound was louder than anything I'd ever heard. Even clutching my ears barely did anything to stop its incessant screams. It was rhythmic, almost like Morse code, but faster and more erratic. It wasn't just coming from the television. In fact, each and every electronic device in the house connected to the internet played the same horror, the stereo from my neighbor's house, and from a radio of a car driving by. As far as I could tell, the whole world had turned into one horrific scream. I hadn't noticed until then that my father sat glued in front of the television screen, unblinking and unresponsive. I tried to pull him away, but to no avail. He was in some sort of trance. Be it from a broken circuit or from the screeching itself, suddenly everything in the house shut down, a total blackout affecting only our house. The screeching then stopped around the neighborhood, and once the television turned back on, the channel was gone. It's been a month since the events of Bright Horizon 9, and there's not a shred of evidence of this ever happening. According to every available source, we haven't even visited Mars yet. My parents made me talk to a shrink, and I almost convinced myself I had gone crazy for a while. But here I am, desperately looking for someone else that remembers. I don't know why I haven't forgotten, but I can't be alone. These things, whatever they are, killed the entire crew without breaking a sweat, and managed to hijack the equipment on board Bright Horizon 9, erasing the collective memory of the entire human race. They needed us to forget so that we can't fight back. I truly hope I'm crazy, because if I'm not, they're coming here next. Alright, so that story is interesting, and that to do true horror, you need it to be believable, right? You need to have things in the world that are things that could happen, things that people can believe could happen to them. That's where the true horror comes from, is imagining the events occurring to you in the story. And that story takes place on Mars with an alien species yet unencountered. Therefore, it kind of loses some of that believability and realism. However, the genius in that story is in the finishing lines, where the main character, our protagonist, is the only one who remembers the events that transpires, and so he's forced to sit back and question his own sanity and whether or not these events actually occurred or whether it's all in his head, because that is relatable, and that is something people can believe happening to them, especially in the end where he starts to hope that he has lost his mind, because if not... That was a fun story. Thank you, OP. I do appreciate that post. That was really good. Next, my friends! Yes, I brought my wife back from the dead. I'm starting to think that was a mistake. 4 days ago, I tried to drown my dead wife. Her emerald eyes locked into mine as I dunked her head into the water. The bubbles of air began but soon stopped. I can't say I watched the life flood out of her eyes because there was no life in them. She'd been dead for days by then. It wasn't until recently we decided to bring her back. We didn't care about the consequences. We wanted her back, no matter what it took. She was the centerpiece of our family, the love of my life, and when she died, a piece of everyone who knew her did too. It shocked our town when the news broke of her death. She worked the late shift at the hospital on that warm Friday night. She was on her way home when she was hit by a drunk driver head-on. Physically, she was able to be saved, but mentally, she was gone. The doctor said her brain hemorrhaged upon impact. They said there was nothing they could do. They said she was gone. I made the decision to pull the plug that night, ending her life. It just seems I can't end it a second time. Her funeral went as smoothly as a young mother's could. People gave eulogies, people cried, people expressed their shock for her sudden death, all while I stood in the corner, biting my nails, wondering what the hell I'd do without her. My mother-in-law brought the idea up to me a few days after her funeral. Those 5 words drew me in almost instantaneously. We can bring her back. The book she set on my table smelt of mildew and was coated in an inch of dust, but as I brushed it off, the title was revealed. Necromancy. Yo, bro, your mother-in-law's got issues. Just saying. As my mother-in-law explained, I fell away from reality. I could have her back. She could be in the living room telling the kids stories an hour from now. Everything could be the same. So there I was, digging into my wife's grave with the hope of bringing her back. Cracking open the casket revealed a pale girl, Her skin was sunk into her bones, gashes covered her face. The sight of her corpse made me glad we had a closed casket ceremony. I don't remember any of the spell, only the aftermath. Now, I'm not going to lie and say a giant thunderbolt rained down on the casket or everyone in the graveyard rose from the dead, because it didn't happen. Everything was silent. All we saw was an arm come up, then a torso, and then I saw her take a breath while opening her eyes. My light shined on her face, those emerald eyes revealed to me once more. The rest of the night was a blur, but we could definitely tell something was different. She didn't speak or react. She stared endlessly, as if the whole world was in front of her. We took her home that night, and my mother-in-law sobbed as the shell of her daughter sat in the back. It was clear that whatever the hell she did resurrected her body, but not her mind. At least, not all of it. Her mom killed herself 2 days after, and the note she left stated she couldn't move on without her daughter. But honestly, I think she killed herself because she turned her daughter into what she was today. As the days followed, I tried to make the best of this, but it's hard to see the worst. The kids don't recognize her. I couldn't talk to her. She just wasn't there mentally. She was suffering. I could see it. Reality really hit me when I tied her up in the basement for the night in fear of her being spotted. That's when those sweet dreams of her sitting on the couch talking with me were soon crushed by the brutal reality of the situation. The other night I caught her tearing into the neighbor's dog. It was as if she hadn't eaten in years. I grabbed her flaky skinned arm, causing her to scratch and bite as I rushed her back inside the house, taking her away from her prey, taking away from the world. The next morning they found the dog. Everyone thought it was a coyote who killed it. It was clear I couldn't leave her out of my sight anymore. I'm scared of what she might do to the neighbors, or the kids. I've taken the lock in my trunk when I'm at work. I can't imagine she minds. Hell, I can't imagine she even realizes. 5 days ago, I opened my trunk to take her out, only to find some of her back fused to the floor. I should have known. It was record temperature the day before. I let out a sigh and grabbed her shoulders. As I pulled swiftly, her skin tore off like wrapping paper. A putrid odor lingered in the air. But that's when a sense of clarity hit me. She's still decaying. She's still suffering. I need to end this. So that's when I started all of this. 4 days ago, I tried drowning her in my bathtub. 3 days, I smashed her head in with a brick. 2 days ago, I lit her on fire and watched as her skin peeled, but everything else stayed intact. Yesterday, I shot her in the head. The bullet went clean through her skull, but to no avail. Someone please help. Nothing seems to work. Every time I try to end her life, she just stands there, staring off into space. I'm writing on here to ask someone, anyone, to help me end my wife's suffering, because every time I look into those eyes, I do see a life. A life screaming to die. Alright, my follow-up thoughts. So that one is interesting. It seems more like a suspense tale to me than a horror story. It doesn't seem scary in the least to me personally. But the caveat there is I'm amused by it, and the primary reason I'm amused is because of the idea that this dude's writing on, like, Yahoo Answers or something, like, yo, does anyone know how to kill my wife? Like, she's dead, but she's undead. You all got anything you can help? Because, like, I don't know what to do. I'm lost. And that amuses the ever-loving crap out of me. The story, of course, we're going for, like, a whole Pet Cemetery thing here, where you bring them back, they don't come back right, yada, yada, yada. But, like, that's the amusing part to me, is the absurdity of the situation. And the great part is, on the original post in Reddit, one of the commenters gave instructions how to dissolve a body down to nothing but goo and bones, and the immediate follow-up to his comment was, I'm curious how you know this. That just made the whole thing better. That was just great. Anyway, that's going to do it for this particular video. Thank you all so much for being here and listening with me. I do appreciate you very, very much. If you would, please click that like button, click the subscribe button. We would be forever grateful for these fit tasks. And until next time, my friends, remember to take care of yourselves, look out for one another, and have a great day!